Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. We hope you had a great day 2 at JNUC. And again, on behalf of Jamf, I'm one of the salespeople at Jamf. We really thank you for being here and for being great, loyal customers. So I think there's an expression that we save the best to last, and I think that's why we're all here today at 4:15 to have Andrew Chen talk to us about macOS upgrade lifecycle. And Andrew is from Warby Parker, and 2 of his colleagues are also in the audience today. So thanks for being here, and I will pass it to Andrew.
Go, Andrew!
Sorry, he reminded me that he has a mic already. Good that I don't do this for a living.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for attending my session today. I'm Andrew Chen. I'm an IT systems engineer at Warby Parker and the subject matter expert for endpoint management. Been working in IT for about 20 years, and I've been a Mac admin for the last 10. In this session, I plan to go over our workflow when a new version of macOS is released. Fun times. How we prepare, test, and deploy org-wide. When I joined my current team, the macOS endpoints, we're on about 4 different major versions of macOS. Since implementing this workflow, we've gone to over 90% updated to the same OS, about 2 weeks after our deferral period expired. I'll be referring to some popular utilities found on GitHub throughout this session. I will not be going into the minutia of each setting and deployment, but I will be linking the GitHub repos for you guys. Please feel free to read through the wikis on them, check out the many past JNUC sessions regarding those particular utilities. And I'm sure you may run into a few people who helped build and contribute to those here today. All right, so we're going to be going over today Appleseed for IT, the tools and resources, planning and testing, and then all the way through org-wide release, essentially just the workflow that I've been using the last couple major macOS releases at Warby Parker. All right, so Apple announces a new version of macOS at WWDC. For quite a while, Apple has made a habit of announcing the new version there at their developer conference. This generally excites most Mac users. But if you're like me, your brain starts going to dark places. Now what? What new bugs will this introduce? What software will stop working? Will this break security or MDM enrollment? These questions and more have been plagued my mind with these announcements for quite some time, especially since Apple has recently taken away our ability to easily defer an update past 90 days. All right, let's get to testing. If you've not already done so, you can sign up for Appleseed for IT beta on their website using the same managed Apple ID you'd use for Apple Business Manager. You log into the Appleseed website and take a look at their guides. If you have software update configuration profile blocking beta, make sure you create a new profile that allows beta and scope it to your test machines. Oh, back up. To enroll the Macs, take a look at your Enroll Device tab on the website. We'll give you some instructions. And here is the QR code for Appleseed for IT, in case you're not familiar with it. Or you can just Google through it, either way. I'll be having all these QR codes at the end of my session, too. All right, so Apple has a pretty cool thing called a test plan on that website. It's a comprehensive Excel spreadsheet that allows you to track your testing as well as providing you with a single pane of glass to review the progress of your testing. This tool has helped me organize our testing and track results. If you find a bug, don't forget to send that info to Apple via the Feedback Assistance app in the beta macOS you're testing. And you can find that link there as well as at this QR code as well. Cool. All right. Here's an example of what the dashboard looks like on the macOS testing spreadsheet. As you fill out the other tabs on this comprehensive Excel spreadsheet, it's going to come together on this dashboard page. So you can have a nice overview, like a nice little single pane of glasses is a popular term in IT. And you can share that info with stakeholders easily, pop it in a slideshow, good to go. All right, so tracking compatibility and some prep work. So I'm here, we're going to go into some of the tools I use for our workflow. All right, the first thing I usually do is I deploy an updated extension attribute to track which machines are compatible with the new version of macOS. Zach Thompson has built a comprehensive extension attribute to track macOS compatibilities, and they continue to update this to include macOS Sequoia. This has been instrumental in our workflow, and I can't thank them enough for spending the time to not only build and update the script, but publicly share it on GitHub. You can check out the QR to the repo at the end of this slide. Next up is we're going to build some smart groups. Once you have it run for a few weeks, your smart groups should start to fill out nicely. These are the smart groups that we use in our org. Can't load macOS, number. Can load macOS, can't load macOS, not enough storage. Like I said, it's a very comprehensive extension attribute, which will tell you all these things, and you can build your smart groups around them. All right, once we have these smart groups up and running with valid data, we can start making some projects and tickets. One, to replace any Macs that may not be compatible, the end-of-life Macs. Or two, reach out to users with minimum storage issues, right? Reach out to them, help them clear out their storage, so on and so forth. This is also a great time to add deferral configuration to your end users if you don't want them to update on release date, right? So at this point, we're still at the beta stage. macOS release date hasn't come yet. We're in July, WWDC happened. Great time to start adding your deferrals. All right, we keep ours at 90 days deferred for major versions. This can be found in configuration profiles, restriction payloads, functionalities in Jamf. And highly recommend setting that unless you want a little bit of chaos. If you like chaos, go for it. Just leave it alone. Here's a QR code to that extension attribute. Leave that up for a minute. It's a really good read through. There's some nice stuff you can do with that. All right. Apple releases the new macOS to the public. We just went through this in the beginning of September. Our countdown begins. Now that the 90 days have started to tick down, it's time to get to work on some policies and documentation. Because the public download link was not available prior to this day, some policies and scripts and workflows cannot properly be tested without the actual download link to the file for the update. This is why I wait for the day of the release to start working on building and testing those scripts out. You can build it ahead of time, but you can't really actively test it without the public link there. And you'll see the workflows and scripts that I'm using for this. All right, so setting up policy scripts and updating our support articles, super, super useful information. The first utility I use is erase install. This is a GitHub repo. We use this policy to update users from self-service that skips most of the next and continue buttons along the way. Really useful for end users that maybe don't follow along with the natural prompts. A little easier for them to follow along with this. Not necessary anymore really with the deltas, but we'll get there a little bit later. We use nudge to steer folks into the direction of the new OS instead of updating their current OS, or the opposite, right? If we don't want them to upgrade to the latest major, we can set it to point them to the right areas using screenshots and nudge and so on and so forth so they can actually click on the right thing in system updates. Update any support articles. It's important to keep the articles updated with new screenshots, features, links, etc. with every new major OS to keep the source of truth accurate, to limit the amount of tickets that are open on release day. I'm sure you guys have seen big upticks on release day. People are like, wait a minute, I want the newest thing. Maybe if you have an article that automatically replies to those tickets, it'll reduce your ticket count. We also like to add some info to our weekly internal newsletters about any upcoming new OS builds and expectations ahead of time. And last but not least, our onboarding documentation, right? Same with onboarding docs. We want to ensure any new employee doesn't hit any snags enrolling a new device that may have the latest version of macOS installed. There are always going to be some outliers with the new version of macOS. Apple likes to ship computers with the newest version on it. So even if your environment may not be ready for Sequoia, you're going to have a couple in your environment. It's going to happen as you order new equipment. So it's nice to have some of those documentations ready to go when a new end user joins. All right, so now we're going to go over the tools piecemeal, so you get a little more information how our setup is, right? So Erase Install is the first thing we're going to go over. Graham Pugh has built an amazing repo on GitHub for Erase Install. This utility has been great for our org in keeping upgrades, wipes, and other workflows seamless and user-friendly. You can check out their GitHub repo to see how you can utilize it. We use it as a self-service policy by uploading the entire package as a policy, and then we use a separate launcher script in the same policy to send specific commands. You can see that sort of grayed out in this screenshot here. But just to let you know, we use like the force curl command that bypasses any curl issues with downloading the file. The reinstall command, so it triggers an upgrade instead of wiping people's devices, right? I know the name is Erase Install, but you can use it as an upgrade path. We use the confirm flag to bypass any confirmation screen, so users don't have to read the legalese on the screen and click next and all that. We use the OS tag to identify which version of the OS that this policy is going to download. We use the cleanup tag to remove any remnants of the payload post-install, so once the update is done, it can just get rid of all that Erase Install stuff that's locally stored on the computer. And you can check out their QR code there from the wiki. Very, very useful tool for our organization, and I highly recommend it. Since most, if not all, major updates are flagged as Delta updates these days, which allows standard users to upgrade, this may not be needed in your workflow. We like to use it to provide a better end user experience with our upgrades, as it skips up the nonsense screens that users don't really pay attention to anyway. You know, it pops up, they type in their username and password, and it just goes. Nudge, another great tool. Nudge is a great tool from the Mac admins repo. Any Mac admins here? All right. The way we use Nudge for OS upgrades is to create a pop-up that directs users to the self-service policy to upgrade. So when they hit that little update button in the Nudge pop-up, it sends them right to that policy in self-service and auto-runs it. This tool can be highly customated to suit your needs as an org, and can be configured to be as limited or as annoying as you want it to be. You can have persistent windows, full screen windows, you can set deadlines, et cetera. A lot of cool different features in there. You can be as annoying as you want to your end users. Make sure your managers are okay with the amount of annoying level you're doing, though. For this configuration, we have the action button pointing to the self-service policy, like I said earlier. Definitely check out their wiki. Super cool tool. Play around with it. Some people, we also use this just for minor updates as well, Nudge. We tend to get about 80% upgraded within 2 weeks after we push out a Nudge for a minor update as well. Really depends on your end user audience. Some are more liable to click on the update when it pops up, some are not. Depends on your org. There are other tools for that. You can use Super if you want to force updates, things like that, but we're not going to get into that here. All right, setting up for public release, right? I like to first encourage our tech team, which we call tech services at Warby Parker, to upgrade first. This ensures our engineers are comfortable with the new OS and its features, but also make sure that we can come up with some workarounds together if we see any major bugs. We like to reach out to department heads to fish for testers if possible. We like to have a few from each department as this broadens our use cases so we can hunt for bugs better. Not every department's going to use every single app or environment, so it's nice to have a little bit from each department to open up our beta testers to after public release is out. For us, for our comms, we set up a private Slack channel and invite those testers to it so we can actively have a communication with those beta testers, report bugs, share workarounds, et cetera, et cetera. We also have our test group upgrade using our erase install self-service script to broaden the testers with that to make sure everything is working. It's nice if you have 5 or 10 people from your team to test it, but it's even better to have 30 people across the org with different tech levels testing out that script to see how it works out for you. And also, really important, we have 2 spreadsheets for that first spreadsheet I showed you for the testing with the single pane of glass. It's really important to set up a second one for public because the bugs and information in that beta spreadsheet is going to be vastly different than the public release one. So you want to make sure you're capturing any new bugs and starting from scratch when you have the public release. All right, the first dot update is released. Hooray. Hopefully some bug fixes are coming. All right, we continue the workflow until the first major update is released. So we'll go through our bug list, see if any bugs were fixed or any new bugs were added in the next release. I'm sure you guys have all dealt with that before. We get feedback from testers on the new version. Again, we're talking in Slack. Hopefully that they're reporting them all. And also our own team is on the newest version as well, so hopefully they're also reporting and adding more information to that Excel spreadsheet. We continue to test and log our findings. And super important, send feedback to Apple as needed. Any new bugs introduced, we should be sending it to Apple so they can at least get a scale of how many people are affected and hopefully come out with a bug fix for it. We usually continue this until 15.1, like the first major dot update. Or if our 90-day timer is up and it is what it is, we can't stop the floodgates at that point. Our 90-day timer is up. We're at the finish line. Last year it fell on Christmas. Woohoo! What a great present that was. At this point, the floodgates have opened, and pretty much any user can now update thanks to the Delta updates. You will also likely have a long line of users who have been chomping at the bit to get this new version. I know I've already got some people tapping me, asking me about it, and asking to join the beta and stuff like that. At this stage, any documentation should be made public to end users to follow, as well as maybe a new communication sent out in your weekly newsletter if your company provides one. Or if you have like an intranet page or a home page or something all your employees go to, have some sort of documentation there. After that, sit back, have a drink, enjoy the fruits of your labor. Last year, for example, we had a very successful time running this workflow for upgrades. By week 2, after the 90-day deferral period came out, we were sitting at 90% upgraded out of a fleet of around 500 Macs. So not too bad. The next slide I have up will include all the QR codes from previous slides, and I also welcome any questions at this time, and I'll do my best to answer them. Yes?
What is the benefit of putting the information in an extension app?
Oh, the benefit of putting the things, I don't know if I'll repeat it for the people because we're doing a recording. The benefit for putting that information in an extension attribute is you can build smart groups off of that. That way you can scope your policies depending on that. Like, I don't want to scope the install macOS policy to somebody who doesn't have enough storage. I don't want to even give them the option because then they're just going to sit there looking at a screen while it loads for it to then just fail. Mike's coming over to you.
For group testing outside of IT for other departments, do you give them notification that this may be a breaking change? And if so, what is the backup plan for them to be functional again?
Repeat that one more time.
So when you're working with external groups outside of IT, when you're going to give them a new OS to test, if they run into issues that break their workflows, what's the backout solution? Are they aware that it could be breaking? Because it's hard to
So
go
like when
backward.
it's running the self-service script, if that fails is what you're talking about?
Just if the new OS has issues with their workflows.
Oh, okay, so if they introduce a bug that they can't work anymore or anything like that, it's as simple as us just swapping out their Mac for something that works or just wiping their Mac if possible. We're a very cloud-centric company, right? So most of our docs are on Google Drive. Our company is Google. So mostly we don't have issues with local files. So we'll just either wipe their device and downgrade them, or we can hot swap their device and try to troubleshoot their current device, get them back up and running. But I always leave a disclaimer when I'm looking for testers, like, hey, you're likely gonna find some bugs, that's the point. So that's why I keep it kind of voluntary to add the beta testers. The people joining hopefully are aware that they're part of this experience to help the org as a total and are okay with potentially some hiccups here and there. That's a good question.
In regard to feedback, are you having the users submit feedback from the feedback app on their own to get the sys diagnosed from that machine, or is it up to the IT department to gather that information?
Sure, so in our org, our IT department is the only ones that have access to Apple Business Manager. So they're the only ones getting the Appleseed beta to test. So they're the only ones with the feedback app. When public release happens and we open up beta to the rest of our employee pool, they're providing that feedback to us as an IT team in the Slack channel, to which then we are providing that feedback to Apple after we verify it and reproduce it.
Just a question regarding when you're deploying the race install script, do you find yourself pre-staging the delivery of the installer, or do you let the user experience the entire thing when it's like 14 gigs?
Great, yeah, no, that's a great question. So we don't pre-stage any installers during this workflow at all. What's great about Erase install is the moment they hit that script in self-service and it kicks off Erase install, it downloads the latest version of the macOS you've tagged with that OS flag. So it's always going to guarantee you get the latest version, right? So when somebody upgrades either on release day or later down the line, they're always going to get the latest update. So there's no worry about having to stage or delete an old file, add a new file, and keep up with any of that packaging stuff. For instance, I haven't really packaged an app for anything in our Jamf instance for about a year and a half. I've got everything pretty much automated through Installmator for third-party apps, and then I have this for OS updates. So you don't really have to worry about making sure things are not cached and remove them, things like that.
Any other questions?
Up front.
Firstly, thank you for your time. I just want to know, what is your plan now for the remaining 10% of devices? And if that 10% evolves into now 5%, what is your plan for those?
Sure. I mean, what we did last year was we kind of just let them sit. As long as they're getting the latest updates and getting the latest security updates, we don't really care if they're on one major OS behind. Not a real big deal for us, as long as they're doing the updates. If they're skipping the updates, we will create a vulnerability management ticket and have somebody on our support team reach out to the end user and help them update. We never really had a hard deadline. It just naturally occurred where the majority of our systems were updated by that time. So we don't try to shove it down people's throats, the new version. We just let it go naturally. But again, that's going to change based on your org and what your security operations team decides might be necessary, things like that. So we had a little bit of pushback from our security operations at first until we explained that previous versions of macOS still get security updates, and we just had to bridge that gap of knowledge.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you. So again, my name is Andrew Chen on Mac Admin Slack. If you're a member, it's andrew.chen. Pretty easy to remember. If you want to reach out to me, feel free. And thank you for coming.